All right.
Okay, it's the Senate Education Committee, May 6th. So as we passed our major bill out on Friday afternoon, we're left in particular at this point with the miscellaneous ed bill. I'll just say to the committee that my sense is that since we have a joint hearing with the House on Friday, we should aim for getting, my sense is we should aim for getting this bill out on Thursday. In order for there to be time for the House to review, and there has to be a conference committee have some chance of. So if we want to keep the goal alive for the year, my sense is we should probably try to get it out by Thursday. So we, over the last couple of weeks, have checked off the first 12 sections as ready to go. I think that remains on that page, and I think they have voted differently. The first 12 sections are ready to go. We've been doing something a little bit backwards with this bill, which we put it in first and then decide whether to keep it in. So we're continuing with that tradition. We are going to start with section 17. And that I'm assuming the underlying assumption is you're not in a time crunch, are you?
I'm sorry?
Do you have a time crunch?
No.
Okay. So we'll identify yourself for the record, and then we'll take a look at section 17.
So Sophie Zidani for the Office of Legislative Counsel. So we're just looking at the last couple of pages of H480, and this is section 17. This is to do with public employees' healthcare benefits, and this just adds in a couple of changes. So we've gone through with the committee a couple of weeks ago now, but an overview of how the commission works and how healthcare benefits for public school employees are negotiated. And one of the things that we discussed was under the current approach, whether it's the Vermont Labor Relations Board, a single arbitrator or a panel of arbitrators, the decision is made between the last best offer of either party. So this is at the final stage of the negotiations. Once the contract negotiations are broken down and you hit impasse, the final stage is arbitration. And under the current approach, the final decision maker, again, either the VLRB or an arbitrator or arbitrators, decides between an entire package. So whether that's the package by the commissioners representing the employees or the package of the representatives of the school boards. What this change is proposing is that instead of it being an entire package, the arbitrators can decide between the last best offer of each party on an issue by issue basis. So, there's a limited number of topics that are up for discussion under this particular legislative statute around the negotiation of healthcare benefits. This would provide the arbitrator, the LRB, to make that decision, which proposal they want to adopt between the two parties, but they can do it on an issue by issue basis rather than all of one or all of the other.
Yes.
So I get the idea, and I support the idea, but I'm not sure. It just leaves a little bit of confusion with the word between, and I would recommend, it's just recommendations of the committee, that instead of using the word between, that replace with shall select elements from the last best offer instead of between. Between to me sounds like you got to choose one or the other. Still choosing between the two. You can't. Thought the idea was to select the best parts, or from the arbitrator's perspective, the best parts of either deal.
Right. So the parties make their last best offer on each of the issues that are still in dispute. And this would then allow the arbitrator to pick, party A's proposal on this issue. And
I'm just saying the wording still leaves me hanging. That I'm not quite sure it very clearly delineates that they can choose from one set of offers or the other set of offers. So, yeah, my thought was to instead of saying between, just say elements from. Yeah, I'm not a lawyer.
Okay, the last part of the sentence.
No, I get the last one.
That's where the between that was asking, that's right. Yeah, that's-
Yeah, but you're selecting between the two offers. Not, you're selecting elements from the last two offers, you're selecting between the two offers. To me, it's not as crystal clear as the intent. I fully understand the intent, and I support the intent.
I guess my concern would be if you said elements, it might suggest that on each issue, you could break
I
down
get that.
that issue into individual elements. So the language that I put in here was the same language that's used under the labor relations for teachers and administrators language, where they have the parties can decide if they go to arbitration under that particular act. They can decide what the jurisdiction of the arbitrator is, whether it's going to be, you have to pick an entire package, or you can pick between the two parties' last best offers on an issue by issue basis. I think as long as you capture that it's the whole issue, I guess my concern, if you said elements, that you might then get into pulling apart each party's last best offer on a particular issue. My understanding was what the committee was looking for was the ability to choose on an entire issue whether you're going to go with this party or that party, not breaking down the individual bits. So
And this is, you're saying this is the same language used.
yeah, so I just looked at the language that's under the labor relations for teachers and administrators act, just to be consistent. That's the language that they use with regard to the arbitrator's jurisdiction under that act.
Yes.
So I was just rereading what Sue submitted to us. And aside from the change to the language, which would be, you know, in my mind, a big change to kind of labor relations in this area, I was curious about the first piece, which was what the arbitrator can think about when making a decision. It looks like right now there's not very much that is spelled out that they consider when
So
making a decision.
That's the second change. to that.
Okay.
Yes, I'm going to get to that.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, I don't know if I take verbatim what was recommended by VSBA, but I do think what's worth thinking about as we evolve our education plan is to look at the inflator that we put into our future foundation formula and link the decision making here around what fits within the parameter of that inflator. It's a new area. It's sort of as we, you know, unsettle all this stuff and it has to resettle. That I think is what I would hope an arbitrator is taking into account, is that it's gonna start to get us out of whack again. If the proposals on the table are not within that inflator range. That makes sense.
It does, I know what you're saying. Let's look at the language.
Yes.
It's sort of there. Let's see if it's,
Right. So this lists out the things that, again, the arbitrator, whether it's the board or a panel, the factors that they can consider. So right now they've got 5 factors. This would add 2 more. So the 6th factor is the value of the healthcare benefits of school employees as compared to health plans available through Vermont, through Vermont Health Connect. And 7 would be the percentage increase or decrease in education spending that's likely to result from each party's last best offer as compared to overall economic growth for the state of Vermont.
yes.
The very last sentence, towards the end of line 20, line 21. It seems, I mean, this isn't, I don't know a ton about this process here, but the arbitrator is supposed to take into consideration the economic growth of the entire state when considering this.
Right, that's
I mean, that seems like, I guess I don't know what my question is, but that just seems a little, I don't know if outlandish is the right word, but I mean, is that really?
We don't have them.
What?
Which we don't have them.
No, what?
Since we don't have any growth.
Well, regardless of whether we have growth or don't have growth, I think that when you're talking about negotiating health insurance contracts between teachers and school boards, to have an arbitrator somehow calculate the entire economic growth for the state, whether there is growth or there isn't growth. I
Well, I think,
don't know how they take that.
There's a GDP.
Change that to region?
no, I think, let me try to paraphrase the intent. I heard this from a constituent, is that you can't, essentially, don't raise education spending more than the state's GDP is growing. That's really the intent. So if there is no growth, then the budget for taxes should increase, that they're basically in step. That's the fundamental thought. Whether the language is correct, that's the fundamental concept. So I swore that I would bring this in front of the committee and noodle it.
And it wouldn't be the arbitrator that would have, I mean, what would happen is the parties would present that evidence and then the arbitrator would weigh it. You know, it wouldn't be, so the burden wouldn't be on the arbitrators to come up with that. That would be information that the parties would be looking to provide to the arbitrator. If that helps.
It does.
My point is that it never goes down. It always goes up. So if we're all on an even playing field, then can we say that you're not gonna have an increase? So it's about the health benefits, right? So who's the other arbiter that gets to say, you know, when we had 3% inflation, so are we they're gonna take a hit? I don't think so.
Yes.
I think we're in a really valuable, like, chicken egg
Yeah.
question for next session about, you know, many of the advocates want to make sure the inflator is reasonable. The inflator will only be reasonable if costs are kept reasonable. So, you know, maybe we ask for that inflator to do some more work to guide other decisions about proposals that are on the table in negotiations.
And it might be the case that here that we would do that, reference the inflator of saying within the confines of the arbitrator being able to consider
Right.
the inflator as
Right.
opposed to the state's economy, because the inflator is going to be the inflator, not so much money there is to go around. So
Right.
in a way, this says it. It
Yeah.
almost says it.
It's, well, I guess in a way, it says it just as vaguely as what already exists in my mind. What's the cost of everything? What's the cost to, so there's kind of existing language that is all warm and fuzzy, you know, but if we want to make that a more serious metric for this poor arbitrator, whoever they are, you know, I think it needs to be more specific if it's gonna matter. Because otherwise it does say, think about everyone's expenses and how expensive society is and healthcare and all that.
Okay. We're going to hear some testimony in a few minutes. So should we want to just, I think, walk through it, understand what it does or what it's intended to do, and then come back to it. I think we've done that.
Okay.
Thank you. So there were a couple of other, what's the change of the top of page 29? Is that just, oh yeah, that's just purely, yeah.
It was,
got it.
yes, we're
Yeah.
under our drafting manual. We're trying to get away from his
Yeah,
over.
yeah, got it.
And
Yeah.
yeah, that
Okay.
was just the technical.
Okay, so why don't we, so thank you. Thanks for doing this.
You're
and getting the focus. Why don't we then shift to so we checked off our first 12 sections. We'll take this to 13. I think, Beth, you've walked us through section 13 before the party act arrested them. Right?
It's section, let's see,
13.
I have, but sorry, Beth St. James, Office of Legislative
Yeah,
Counsel. I don't, you want me to come up?
Well,
I don't think we've walked through, I'm sorry.
okay, okay,
I don't think we've walked through these changes.
okay.
Okay, let me share my screen. Sorry.
So we'll look at sections 13, 14, 15, and 16 as well.
Okay, so we are looking at section 13, which is acute cardiac events in schools. Yes, we've walked through this language many times. But then the last time I was in the seat on this bill, I was asked to add some language or some amended language. And this is it. So the yellow represents new language that we haven't looked at yet. Although I should say, you haven't looked at it with me walking through it. I believe you've been, I believe you've had a walkthrough of this language, right? Did they have a walkthrough of the language?
It was in the handout we gave as part of my.
So each public school and independent school with an athletic department or organized athletic program, I'm on page 23, line 12, shall establish, review, and annually rehearse an athletic emergency action plan, an AEAP, that shall detail the steps to be taken in response to a serious or life-threatening injury of a student participating in sports or other athletic events. The AEAP established by public and independent schools pursuant to the subdivision shall be consistent with the Athletic Emergency Action Plans policy established by the Vermont Principals Association. And then on page 24, line 5, this is what the plan needs to require. And so now that this section contemplates two different plans, the cardiac emergency response plan and the athletic emergency, action plan, thank you. The AEAP is added there on line 5. And then on the same page 24, line 19, while starting on line 17, AED placement. The plan for AED placement shall include a requirement for clearly marked and easily accessible AEDs at each athletic venue where practices or competitions are held. And then training on page 25, line 4, all athletic coaches shall obtain and maintain training in cardiopulmonary resuscitation, first aid, and the use of an AED. Those are the only changes to this section.
Yes.
Since we have an advocate in the room. Okay, I'm just
So we're going to take some real testimony.
okay, well, I'm just for the get-go. So on page 23, line 7, that's paragraph B, and underneath it falls the AEAP as a subset of what appears to be a subset of the cardiac emergency response plan. Are they in fact two different plans, or is it one plan with a little more detail?
It's just wording it differently, really, because the original version said cardiac emergency response. Oh, I'm sorry. Tina's from the American Heart Association, instructor. The original version said cardiac emergency response plans were required for something like schools and athletics. I'm probably going to say the language wrong, but that was generally it. But for athletics, they don't really think of it in those terms, so they call them emergency action plans. So we just phrased it differently, so it would match kind of what the Principals Association says already.
So is it the same document? Same?
Same plan, but it's just spelled out more clearly. One's for schools, one for sports.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, sir.
Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, first aid, in the last on line 5, page 25. How much first aid are we gonna ask them to train? Who defines what? You know, that could be as simple as putting a Band-Aid on, or as complex as a compound fracture having to before EMT gets there. Who defines that? And you know, that just leaves first aid pretty wide open. That's what I see. Asking somebody who can answer that question, I guess. It's you, Tina. Huh?
I don't think there's a definition of first aid in the bill itself. In the Principals Association's guidelines, it had that requirement. So I just don't know if they define it further. It just said CPR in first aid.
So that's language out of the guidelines, just transferred here, and it's undefined there
Yeah.
as well.
And it was requested by the Athletic Trainers Association.
Or should I have that put in?
Yeah.
And not vote up, because
Yeah, and you heard from Kyle Peckham?
Yeah.
During testimony, he's part of their.
Yes.
Might be outside your subject matter expertise, but, are they looking for a specific like training level that we can earmark?
I don't know, I can ask, I can reach out to him. And,
That would be helpful. I mean, that.
Yeah, just- you know, hey, you were supposed to have first change training. You didn't do this. Well, we didn't train that for that type of scenario. If we're just worried about cardiac arrest events, and it seems like we just take first aid out and the use of AEDs in its particular.
I understand, I can reach out to him to see. I'm thinking it's not a huge burdensome thing, but I'll get an answer, so you'll have.
Okay, so let's circle first aid. Recycle. And I think that in terms of you walking us through this, you have accomplished that. Thank you.
Do you want to move on or do you
Yeah.
like other witnesses?
Well, we'll hear from witnesses afterwards.
Okay.
We'll have you walk through what the sections.
Okay, so I'm on page 25 now, section 15. We have not walked through this yet. This is an amendment to section 3448F in Title 16, Energy Performance Contracting. I believe you had discussions and testimony about this. And that is, so current law, I'm on line 15 here. A district may enter into a performance contract pursuant to the section for a period not to exceed 20 years. And then there was language on page 26, line 19, that required voter approval of a performance contract if the contract was going to be over 10 years. And you all wanted to push it to 20 years for voter approval, but the statute already limits the maximum time to 20 years. So we just struck the voter approval requirement altogether.
Oh, look at. Sorry. Yeah,
I'm wondering if, we'll say, bring it, if we should go past 20 years now because of geothermal payback and other, I believe, when, I can't remember the gentleman that came in and gave me testimony that, 20 years now might be too short for some of these things.
my sense is we open a bigger, makes metaphors that will affect the field.
I'm not worried about it. I just wanted to bring it up because it is a lot of payback doesn't happen in 20 years now. But I'm fine with 20 years.
And everybody will recall, we have the note that was posted from the treasurer, effectively signing off on this. That's just. Any questions for Beth on it?
Section 16, an amendment to the school library material selection policy, which you all added just last year. And I believe, so there's two things happening here. I believe this is a request from the School Boards Association. Does that sound right? And I believe it's making an alignment, a similar alignment that you made in the school safety sections, which is who's responsible for policies and who's responsible for procedures. So school boards are responsible for policies and superintendents are responsible for procedures. And so this is just making two sentences. So each school board is required to develop a policy for library selection, material selection, and then each superintendent or head of school for an approved independent school would develop procedures for reconsideration or retention of materials. And then on lines 15 and 16, they've requested that we add references to the years that these different policies or statements were created. So the 2004 American Library Association's Freedom to Read Statement and the 2024 Vermont Freedom to Read Statement. And that is it for this section.
Actually, just look at this. Yeah, okay, got it.
And then you just walked through section 17 with Sophie, right?
Yep.
Okay. And the only other new. Bit,
You have two sections for what it's worth, two sections 17. The old section 17 is, but anyway, we'll worry about that with the very end of the bill. Page.
oh, did I just not amend the effective dates? Yeah.
But it may not, by the time you do it, we may be down to 17, I guess, so. So any questions for Beth on her, anything she, okay, ready to state, okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we have one other, potential, this was the last, just for discussion, put this on our discussion list. Here. And you all have this little. For the record.
All right, for the record, I am Jody Frechette, with Morris Strategies, a government affairs firm here in Montpelier. I represent the Mill School. It's an independent therapeutic school based in New Speed, Vermont. Thank you all for having me here. This is my first time actually testifying, so I appreciate your kindness for letting me come on today. We have proposed some language to offer some clarifying language, I suppose, to the current moratorium on independent schools. So as you may recall, there was a moratorium on those new independent schools that was set in place in the big bill in 2023. The middle school has been discussing whether or not they want to change from a for-profit status to a nonprofit status. And it seems ambiguous as to whether or not that would actually trigger the moratorium. It seems unclear, as far as I understand from the AOE and from their own attorney, whether or not that change in their tax status actually forces them to sort of come out of the system, and then moratorium sort of shields them from coming back in. And so the language that we've proposed would just clarify that if you are an independent school that has already been approved and you're recognized, that if you convert from your for-profit to nonprofit status, that your previous approvals carry forward, and that you don't inadvertently lose a school out of the system that is serving a specific population segment. So we're not trying to undo the moratorium. We're just trying to preserve the schools that are currently in place. And if they want to change their status, they can do so.
But I haven't had any chance to talk to Beth about this and think through any implications. I just wanted to get on the table. I also want to call into the AOE for their takes on check those two boxes after today. But just wanted to get this on the table for people to understand what the request is and why. And so the rationale is that one or more of these schools may be considering converting from for-profit to nonprofit. It's
possible, right? So it seems as though there's certainly a trend in wanting to provide more supports for the nonprofit schools. For the middle school themselves, that I believe when they were initially trying to form the nonprofit status was a bit more difficult before getting the school up and running, and they wanted to follow a specific timeline, so they took the path that they chose. So now that they're established, they have sort of more of the room to be able to explore other options. With the moratorium in place, it just seems challenging to make that move.
Okay. I think we get it.
Okay.
We get what you're trying to do, and we just got to do a little due diligence.
Perfect.
So,
If you have any
okay.
questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So is there any, the ones we just went through, just to actually keep this thing moving, are we ready to check off? Let's go to section 13. We're going to hear more testimony on that, so skip that one. Let's go to 14. That's the other part of the. Let's go to 15. Energy performance contract.
Check it out.
Check it off. If we can check it off. Check it off. Yeah, get 4. We heard for that testimony. So, okay.
I believe so, yes. Yeah, no, I'm good.
I'm good as well.
Yeah.
So we'll check off, okay. Check off section 15.
At some point, you might want to check it. That's, like I said, I don't want it.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I did hear your point. Um, uh, Section 16. The library selection policy, that kind of makes sense. Board policy, administrators, procedures. Yep, okay. We'll be on board for that one.
It makes sense. The only question I have, again, I don't come out of the independent school world, so I'm wondering if there's some independent school kind of bylaw or whatever that would bump into this.
I actually don't think so. I think it's okay. Okay, yeah.
Because they are already in the underlying
Yeah.
language.
Good.
Yeah, but the,
No, yeah, I understand. Correct.
oh, I see, the non-underlying.
Mhm.
line.
Sorry,
So,
underlying, yeah.
Underlying, okay, good.
Okay, so that's great. Made some progress. So we're down to section 13 and 17. Section 13 is tomorrow's main event. And today, do I have that right? Well, I guess we both days. So anyway, so section 17, we were going to start with. Sue, okay. We've heard from Sue before, but we're doing it, we're kind of just doing sort of a little refresher. So you two are on, introduce yourselves for the record on how you're gonna kind of tag team, right?
Yes, I will start with the piece on statewide bargaining for public school employee health benefits.
Okay,
Good afternoon. My name is Sue Siglowski, and I'm the Executive Director for the Vermont School Boards Association. And I appreciate the chance to speak with you today. I'm here to talk about how Vermont handles health insurance for public school employees and why we believe that the system needs some changes. I've testified on this before, so I won't take up much of your time. I'll just give a brief refresher. As we all know, health insurance is expensive. Right now, the cost of providing health benefits to school employees is taking up more and more of school budgets. And when that happens, it leaves less money for other important things like literacy, mental health supports, arts programs, or even building repairs. School boards want to take care of staff with great benefits, and they also have to make sure there's enough funding for students and learning. That's why we're asking lawmakers to look at the way Vermont bargains for school employee health insurance at the state level. The next round of this process starts in the spring of 2026, less than a year from now, and it will set the rules for benefits through at least 2030. If we want to make real improvements, the legislature should act now. The current system hasn't helped slow down rising costs. For example, employees don't pay anything toward deductibles because of a statewide benefit decided by arbitrators that puts a special account, a health reimbursement arrangement, on top of their regular plan. That raises the price of the plans, and taxpayers pick up most of the tab. Actuaries at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Vermont are involved in setting the premiums for the VHI plans. They factor in the first dollar HRA and a term called induced utilization when setting those rates. The proposal then goes to the Department of Financial Regulation, which has its own actuaries who also take induced utilization into consideration when approving the rates. It's all based on an approved actuarial factor developed by the Federal Department of Health and Human Services that the actuaries use to calculate this rate. I'll just talk a little briefly about how the process works now. Before 2018, each school district made its own deals about employee health insurance. And in 2018, lawmakers moved this to a statewide process and created a group called the Commission on Public School Employees Health Benefits. The commission has 10 members. 5 represent school boards. We call them the employer commissioners, and 5 represent school employees, the employee commissioners. The VSBA chooses the 5 employer commissioners. This group negotiates how much of the health insurance premium costs the school pays and how much the employee pays. Also negotiated are how out-of-pocket costs like co-pays or deductibles are handled, whether schools provide HRAs or HSAs, and these are accounts that help cover healthcare costs, who has first dollar responsibility for out-of-pocket expenses if using an HRA. Each side collects data from schools in the fall before negotiations begin, and that would be this fall that we'll start collecting the data. And then the talks officially start by April of 2026. Now, what if they can't agree? If the commission can't come to an agreement by August 1st, 2026, a neutral person called a fact finder steps in to help them work things out. And if that doesn't work, the fact finder writes up a report suggesting a reasonable settlement. If they're still stuck after that, both sides submit their last best offers to an arbitrator or arbitrators. And under current law, the arbitrators have to pick one offer. No mixing of ideas, no edits. And in past rounds, the arbitrators picked the employee's offer. So let's get to what we're asking for. We're really asking to make the process more fair and balanced so that important factors can be considered. And here's what we're suggesting, and thank you for adding it to draft 10.1 of H480. We're suggesting adding 2 new factors for the arbitrator to think about when making a decision. The first is the value of the healthcare benefits of school employees as compared to health plans available through Vermont Health Connect. And the second is the percentage increase or decrease in education spending that is likely to result from each party's last best offer as compared to overall economic growth of the state of Vermont. And then the second thing that we're asking for is to let the arbitrator build a compromise from parts of both sides' offers instead of having to choose just one. The language in H480 currently states, the VLRB arbitrator or arbitrators shall select between the last best offer of each party on an issue-by-issue basis. We respectfully request an amendment to that sentence by adding the words with or without amendment at the end. This would clarify that even within a given issue, the arbitrators could select somewhere between the 2 parties' positions on that issue. So the language would read, and I have this in bold in my written testimony, the VLRB arbitrator or arbitrators shall select between the last best offer of each party on an issue-by-issue basis with or without amendment. I'll just finish by saying the bottom line is schools need to take care of their staff and they need to make sure students are getting the best education possible. And if we don't get healthcare costs under control, students will keep losing out. Thank you for listening, and we hope you will support the changes that can keep Vermont schools strong for everyone. Thank you.
Did you?
Just to clarify, where are school employees generally getting their healthcare benefits from right now? Is it through Vermont Health Connect or through some other plan?
It's through VHI,
And what does that stand for?
Vermont Educators Health Initiative.
And do you have a general idea of the price difference between VHI and Vermont Health Connect?
I believe that the VHI plans are more expensive because they are much more generous.
Expensive than what? Sorry.
Than Vermont Health Connect?
Oh, right. Yeah.
And so how would this reduce healthcare costs exactly?
I spoke a little bit earlier on in my testimony about the health reimbursement arrangement that is part of this bargaining that happens, and that on top of the regular plan raises the price of the plans because when actuaries price the plans, they look at the fact that school employees don't pay anything toward deductibles because it's completely covered by the health reimbursement arrangement. And they factor in that first dollar HRA in a term called induced utilization when setting those rates. So it's important to take that into account.
Thank you.
So just to make sure we understand it, on page 28, line 14, when you add the words with or without amendment, so what it really means is that when the arbitrator chooses between the last best offer of each party on an issue by issue basis, they can do that, but then they can also modify by choosing little elements that they want from the issues, correct?
Yes.
Okay, make sure we understand that. Yep.
So I guess taking a step back, this would be a big change for this year, with relatively little time to get in all of the parties. And it is, collective bargaining policy, which is a bigger thing. But I'm, in my Pollyannish way, I'd like to believe that all members of the VHI board, the 5 folks from education and the 5 folks from the school board association, would like to get a hold of healthcare spending and perhaps be the tail that wagged the dog, like use VHI to ensure that property taxpayers aren't overexposed to just continued ballooning cost of healthcare delivery to our teachers and educators. I guess what I'm saying is, has this conversation already been explored with the stakeholders informally? Because I wonder if the NEA, the SBA, and the Green Mountain Care Board could come back with a proposal. I just think we have a very functional Green Mountain Care Board right now that would recognize that this is it's a huge population that we provide health insurance to, that health insurance is too expensive for everyone. And that, we've often, when we had the pension discussion and other discussion, when we included teachers in the conversation about how to engage in reform, we ended up with really good results. We came back the next year with temperatures much lower, and it was a very effective proposal. So I just wonder whether it's formal or informal, if a group can come back to us, or if people see that as not fruitful.
Sue, you're muted. I don't know if you were gonna.
I could just make one clarification. I think it's important to understand that when we talk about the Commission on Public School Employees Health Benefits, that is a different entity than the VHI board. That VHI determines the plans, but this commission determines all of the issues that I listed for you in my testimony, having to do with how much of the premium cost is paid by taxpayers versus how much is paid by employees, and the out-of-pocket costs and the HRAs, that type of thing.
I guess I don't know if the entities could be involved, but I'm very open.
Senator Wood.
So I guess I'm looking at it from a different perspective. I don't understand the union business because I've never been involved in it, but who's the arbiter for the taxpayers? I mean, you've got 2 parties that are discussing how much the healthcare is going to increase. What about the people that pay the taxes? I'm going back to municipalities. PLCT offers, platinum, silver, and gold plans, and municipalities get to pick one based on what they can afford. Taxpayers don't get to do that in this case, do they? Or if they do, who's looking out for their interests in this process?
The employer commissioners are looking out for the taxpayers' interests because they represent school boards, and taxpayers, of course, support the school budgets. So that they are looking out for taxpayers' interests. They do bring witnesses to testify in the arbitration proceeding, and the law very clearly states that the commission shall mutually agree on an arbitrator by April 5th to decide all matters remaining in dispute. If the commission is unable to mutually agree on an arbitrator, it shall either request the Vermont Labor Relations Board or to decide all matters remaining in dispute, or form a 3-member panel of arbitrators to be selected as follows. One selected by the representatives of school employees, one selected by the representatives of school employers. And then the commission, thirdly, shall request the services of the American Arbitration Association for the appointment of the 3rd arbitrator. So that's already all laid out in the law.
So all I hear from my constituents is, you know, last year, health insurance for teachers went up 16%. And this year they went up 13%. How do we fix that? I don't understand.
Well, of course, it is our overall health system that needs fixing, but these changes that we are requesting are what we think that you can do in the short term to be able to help get this process on a more even playing field.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Senator Hershey.
So just to simplify it, are you saying that things are unfair right now for arbitration?
Well, what we've seen is that perhaps there need to be some more factors that the arbitrator needs to consider, and those are the ones that we've requested. And I would also note that this process has happened twice, and both times the arbitrators have picked the employee's last best offer.
Thank you.
I don't know if that answers the
It doesn't.
question about the fairness piece. So was with both times 3 arbitrators? Like,
I think what Sue might have also said, and she can, is that the factors perhaps militate in one direction. But I don't want to say that. I want you to say it. I think.
Yeah, the factors that are listed in the law, we think need to be amended to add 2 more factors to make the process more fair.
That's the principle.
Yes, they're non-binding, right? They're just points of information available.
right.
I don't see a problem with that.
Oh, you mean like
The 2,
the fact that adding the factors? I just don't think there's specific. I mean, I'd be happy to hear Sue comment. Sue, I don't know, Sue, if you heard my little homily before we started formally on this topic, but there's a lot of factors in there. I don't think those factors are one-sided, but I could be told otherwise. They're just factors about the cost of everything and how that affects taxpayers and employees.
We're definitely not saying that the factors are one-sided. I think what we're saying is that a few more factors, it would make it a better process if a few more factors were added. And they are just that. They are factors that the arbitrators shall consider. But you know, they can't just consider one of them. They need to consider all of them together.
We're going to hear some from other. Who's next one?
It's Sandra Cameron and there's Joe.
Okay. So, Senator, you have anything you want? First, identify yourself for the record.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sandra Cameron, Associate Executive Director with the Vermont School Boards Association. Thanks for having me today.
Did you have anything you wanted to add to what Sue
Not to this topic. I'm here to answer any questions and give you my support of the draft 10.1, which includes the language around school library material selection policy.
Oh, you're okay. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
So that takes us then to Jeff. Yep, you're up.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for inviting me back. I provided testimony earlier in April, requesting to
Actually, we already checked off the library materials as a go.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I think you're.
We greatly appreciate your work on this.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon. For the record, Jeff Fannin, Executive Director of Vermont VA. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you today about miscellaneous education bill, the proposal from VSBA to change how educators and school boards bargain healthcare benefits. At this time, I think I need to do a little level setting again. We do not support the changes how teachers and school boards bargain for healthcare. And the reason why, as the voice of public education system's essential workforce, we believe this broader moment calls on lawmakers to prioritize stability for educators' employment conditions, and that introducing the unrest proposed here today takes us in the wrong direction. Before commenting on the measure, the reasons we oppose the proposal, please allow me to sort of set the broader atmosphere in which you'll be asked to introduce even more unrest into an already struggling workforce. Vermont's education system is in a tumultuous moment, facing unprecedented challenges, including growing negative impacts from the Trump administration and pressure from the State House to significantly change funding and school governance. From Washington, Vermont's education system faces significant uncertainty due to recent changes at the federal level at the U.S. Department of Education, including major staffing cuts and program eliminations that are disrupting funding streams and support services previously relied upon by schools. The abrupt termination of pandemic-era federal funding grants has caused an absolute shock to Vermont school districts, with at least $10 million in pending funding suddenly frozen, forcing cancellation of summer programs and literacy initiatives. Here in Vermont, H454 that you passed on Friday will bring sweeping changes to school governance and finance systems, creating uncertainty throughout the educational landscape. The bill represents just one aspect of a complex reform environment that's already placing significant strain on school systems and educators alike. Against this backdrop of major structural reforms, teachers are also navigating implementing new education quality standards, addressing pandemic-related learning gaps, and managing increasing special education needs. My main message here is that messaging to teachers and aspiring college students who might pick this as a career, teaching that is, that healthcare benefits are now also on the chopping block is a bad idea. Given these multiple simultaneous pressures on Vermont's education system, introducing additional uncertainty by reopening teacher healthcare negotiations would be counterproductive. The Commission on Public School Employee Health Benefits, established by Act 11 in 2018, has already created a functional framework for negotiating healthcare benefits on a statewide basis. I will now recount the history of that led us to the current bargaining law, and suggest that reopening this law is not necessary because it's already fair, balanced, and working. That said, there are, for those who are new to the legislature or to the Education Committee, here's a brief summary of how we got to where we are today. In 2017, there was a move by the administration and the VSBA, the Superintendents Association, and the Principals Association to restructure how teachers negotiated for health benefits. They wanted to move away from local level negotiations between teachers and their school boards to a statewide system. This shift was seen by the administration as a cost-saving measure, but was viewed by educators as an attempt to undermine collective bargaining by fundamentally altering the negotiation process for teacher benefits by separating healthcare benefits, bargaining, from the other contract elements like wages. After the contentious fight, a year later, the legislation passed, Act 11 of 2018 in special session. which created a statewide commission on public school benefits, employee benefits, with equal representation from school boards and educator groups. This independent commission was established to determine the amount, quote, determine the amounts of the premiums and out-of-pocket expenses for school employee health benefits that shall be borne by school employees and by participating employers and by participating employees. The commission was charged with negotiating healthcare benefits for all school employees in Vermont, creating a statewide structure instead of a district by district negotiation. The parties have bargained 3 times since the passage of the law. Although the parties agreed to roll over the terms of the second agreement so that the parties could work collaboratively on reducing the cost of healthcare for both sides. So we're in the period of the rollover. Currently, school boards pay 80% of the cost of healthcare premiums, and educators pay 20% of the premium. This contract expires in January 1 of 2028. That 20% premium payment amounts to $52 million paid by school employees, most of whom are women. 75% of teachers and 80% of support staff are women. And that premium amount is an ever increasing annual amount affecting the lowest paid employees. There are some 34,000 covered lives, Vermont lives, under the statewide health insurance agreement, which includes educators and their dependents. Notwithstanding the parties' rollover agreement to try and address the costs to both sides, only Vermont has advocated for policy changes that would actually lower the cost of healthcare on both sides. For example, we have supported S-126, which would require hospitals to charge no more than a reference-based price, such as a percentage of Medicare, as is done in 7 other states. Brown University recently estimated RVP, as we know it, reference-based pricing, would save $50 million for the Vermont education system. Last year, the Senate chartered a course to lower cost. An additional examples, last year, the Senate chartered a course for lowering the cost of prescription drugs by passing a law that Vermont EA championed to establish a prescription drug affordability board, PDAS, as we know it, that will lower the cost of prescription drugs, which, along with hospital costs, is a significant driver of the increase in health insurance. Parties agreed to a rollover of the terms of the second healthcare arrangement because they know the system is broken, as Sue pointed out. We agree on that. So, a new bipartisan group, co-chaired by Governor Jim Douglas and Lisa Ventris, called Vermont Healthcare 911, identified hospital costs as the #1 driver of the cost of healthcare in Vermont. Additionally, data from the Kaiser Family Foundation said health insurance premiums for all families in Vermont went up 92% since 2018. It is no surprise then that the Vermont's healthcare costs are the most expensive in the country. How school boards and educators bargain for healthcare and which side pays what is not the issue. The underlying healthcare system is broken, not the bargaining process. As Legislative Council pointed out to this committee on April 17th, the arbitration process is intended to move 2 parties closer together. And the last best offer, LBO, as we know it, process is intended to get the parties as close as possible to the neutral fact finder's report. LBO also discourages the parties from putting in extreme poison pills in their proposals that would turn off the arbitrators. Instead, the VSBA seeks to allow the final decision maker to mix and match, as we said back to you on April 11th, it was, the parties' LBOs, which could result in incoherent healthcare arrangements for both school boards and employees that neither side contemplated. Additionally, VSBA is now advocating to change the bargaining process to add additional factors for the final decision makers to consider. These changes are unnecessary, as current law covers what VSBA suggests is needed it needs to be successful at the final stage of the process. Current law says the VLRB, the arbitrator or arbitrators, shall hold a hearing at which the parties shall submit all relevant evidence, documents, and written material, including a cost estimate for the term of the proposal, with a breakdown of costs borne by employers and costs borne by employees. And the party may submit oral or written testimony in support of his or her position on any undecided issue that is subject to arbitration. If VSBA believes that it has a compelling argument or relevant data, it can and should introduce that evidence at the hearing instead of asking the decision maker to be forced to review only self-serving arguments that favor one side over the other. Current law satisfies what VSBA is asking, but amending the law, as VSBA suggests, will cause the process to be biased. Moreover, the quote, the labor board arbitrator or arbitrators shall give weight to the evidence, documents, and written material and arguments presented. In other words, the VSBA can submit any arguments it wants and doesn't need to fix a law when it isn't what is broken. This is but a twice used bargaining law that is not what is costing so much. Unlike the general education bargaining law that was passed in 1968, which doesn't get rewritten when one side or another loses at the bargaining table. This new healthcare bargaining law should be allowed to mature without constant corrections. VSBA seeks to add 2 factors the arbitrator must consider: the value of health benefits as compared to the benefits on the Vermont Health Connect, and the percentage or increase or decrease in ed spending that is likely to occur compared to overall economic growth for the state of Vermont. Current law, however, already requires the arbitrator to consider similar information, such as the financial ability of the ed fund and school districts across the state to pay for the cost of health benefits and coverage. Additionally, comparisons to the healthcare benefits of school employees with healthcare benefits of similar employees in private and public sectors in Vermont, and the average consumer prices for goods and services commonly known as the cost of living. The proposed 2 additional factors are redundant information the arbitrators already must consider because VSBA, under existing law, is obligated to submit that information to the arbitrators, who, also under current law, shall consider that properly submitted information. Such a change, therefore, as requested, is superfluous. Make no mistake, every time the cost of healthcare goes up, school employees pay more too. Again, that has nothing to do with how the bargaining process works, and no matter how one stacks the bargaining deck in their favor. Finally, this committee just last week moved on Governor Scott's education proposal that included a suggestion that the state pay teachers 10% more. We believe that type of message is the right one to send to the teacher workforce right now, not that lawmakers are working to inject more unrest into their healthcare bargaining rights. Thank you. I'm happy to answer your questions.
I mean, I saw you nodding a little bit, Jeff, about the notion that everyone could try and make, I mean, I just think VHI and all of this apparatus we set up, our goal 10 years ago, whenever that was to use this as a tool to negotiate lower healthcare costs for everyone. And is there a way that a group could work on that between?
Yes. I mean, I hope so. I mean, that's truly why the parties rolled over the agreement there was a realization that I thought both sides shared that the cost of healthcare, the ever escalating cost of healthcare was the problem. Which pocket it came out of, who paid for it, wasn't the solution. And it's not as if anybody seeks out healthcare on a Friday night and says, I want to go to the hospital because it's either that or a movie. So I think that's, everybody understood the cost was ever increasing. Let's try to figure out how to lower those costs. So PDAB is one, reference-based pricing is one we think could be successful. It's done in 7 other states. And perhaps there's a 3rd or 4th or 5th way. I don't know. It's a complex system. Absolutely. And the plans that we're still using now are what VHI, by virtue of the 2018 law, couldn't change from the first 2 rounds of bargaining. There's a rollover that we're still using those plans. They were created when VHI was controlled by the management associations prior to the passage of 2018. So it's their plans that we'd like to change and maybe create incentives for people or revert them to hospitals or provide that are different that make an actual dent in the cost of healthcare.
And I'd like to, I will just say, before we decide what we're going to do or not do, item about comparing to for the Vermont Health Connect plans, that's not a neutral factor to consider. Many people experience being underinsured on those plans, and with whatever is offered to a lot of workers at our hospitals, they cannot afford to access healthcare. They have said to us many times that even working at UVM Medical Center, they cannot afford access to healthcare with the cost of deductibles and co-pays. And so I just think it's, we were really clear in the pandemic that the health of our teachers and our healthcare workers and our frontline workers was of the utmost importance to ending a pandemic. And so I guess I just don't know how careful the School Boards Association was in putting those two factors forward as the ones they thought should be considered. And I'd like to open the door for that to be a more careful, considered conversation outside of session. But that's about what I'd be willing to do.
Senator O'Shea.
Just a straightforward question. In your opinion, do you think that if this were to pass, it would increase the cost for individual teachers and school staff every month when they're paying their premium?
I don't know, but it does feel like it's putting the thumb on the scale and leaning in that direction. So yes, I think it potentially could. And to your earlier comment about the rising cost of healthcare, my members are saying the same thing. They're paying 20% of the premium. They also pay a portion of the out-of-pocket expenses on the HRA. And the funny thing about an HRA is health reimbursement arrangement is it's the school's money. It's the employer's money at all times, versus an HSA. So if we were to go to an HSA, that annually that money becomes the employee's money, and it's a savings account for them. They can use it that year or in future years. And HRA every year reverts back to the school district. Unused monies are revert back to the school district. So that's a cost saving measure for school districts, unlike an HSA.
Just to clarify that, so the current system has HRAs.
Correct.
And the teachers pay into that?
It's the employer's money.
Yeah.
That employees pay for is the wrong word. They pay the last dollar. So the issue is not about, an HRA is a sum of money that people have access to if they get hurt, sick, or otherwise.
Can you give us a, for instance, maybe?
Sure. I forget the number. It's about, I would say it's around $2,000 for an individual. It could be off. Please don't quote me on the number. But maybe double that for a family. I don't know the exact numbers. But if you were to get sick, go to the hospital, the HRA covers the first $2,000. You're on the hook for the last $400. That's called last dollar. That's what Sue mentioned was the induced utilization. It doesn't induce utilization because you're already in the door. And I think reasonably anybody sitting here will not say that people are using healthcare for kicks and grins. So it's about whether the dollar is the first $400, for example, in my example, or the last $400. The reason you don't want the first $400, that might persuade somebody not to get primary care when it's cheapest and most accessible versus waiting till they go to the hospital. So you want to create incentives for early primary care visits, not create disincentives for that type of care. So if you put that first dollar on the HRA on the employee's back, it could create a situation where I don't want to pay for that money right now in my pocket. I'll let it fester a little bit. And then you end up with larger, catastrophes. That's what's happened nationally. It's understood well that people who have disincentives to getting primary care don't get primary care and wait later to get that care that costs more to the whole system. So to answer your question, Senator Hitching, I think it would potentially raise the cost of employees.
Thank you.
Was that $400 the extent of the employee's exposure?
On the out-of-pockets, yes, they pay 20% of the premium.
Yeah.
And that's not an insignificant amount. That's what I hear all the time. That comes out of their paycheck. And many support staff people barely make a wage. They just work for health insurance.
questions?
So my question is yes, healthcare, trying to get that under control is probably, that will help all of us.
Yep.
But time and time again, we ask employees in a big business or even in the state to pay more toward their healthcare to make it more affordable. Why don't you believe that we shouldn't ask our teachers to do the same? That we're all bearing the burden. Yes, we need to get healthcare under control. I'm not arguing that. Until we do, why isn't it off the books to say, or out of say, really would like you to pay more?
They are paying a lot more than they used to in before 2018. So the answer is they are paying. And it's an ever escalating amount, right? For both sides, because the costs are out of control for both sides. And that's the issue. And that is what gets decided at the bargaining table for statewide healthcare benefits. And so,
and are you believing if they put this statement in with or without amendments, that could get changed and it may change the whole outcome of the bargaining?
I think it actually could change. It could fundamentally, Sue used the words mix and match in her testimony to you on April 11th, I think it was. And if you have an arbitrator, I think it was earlier in the conversation with Sophie that you talked about last best offer. And if you have the arbitrator selecting a sentence out of this last best offer and a sentence out of that one, you could end up with really incoherent health benefits that neither side would want. The arbitrator may think it's legitimate. He or she may think, oh, that makes sense to me. But when the rubber meets the road and people have to implement these things, that's potentially a significant problem. That's why I see the problem with that sentence there, is that it could lead to really not comprehensible results that could disfavor both sides and the whole system as a whole.
Again, how long have we been doing this current system?
Since 2018.
2018.
So 2 bargaining cycles. And the last one, they just, both sides just, let's say, roll over for 2 years and figure out and give VHI a chance to perhaps change the plans, which is part of the commission's task. And so they have to ask VHI to do that.
Yes.
Thanks.
Did I hear Sue say that April, there was a date in April when this has to be decided? Are we already behind Parker for the next bargaining?
I believe what Sue said is next April,
Oh,
April
next
1,
April.
2026.
Okay.
Is when they start.
They start bargaining.
Yeah.
Yeah. The arbitrator doesn't get the case, if you will, for the fall.
We hope that they'd agree to it, so we never went to an arbitrator, but
Right. I mean, that's the goal of the fact finders to draw, if you haven't come to an agreement, the fact finder says, look, I'm going to take a little bit of this, a little bit of that, fact find and put you all together and give you a report that I think you and I could live with, kind of thing. And that's not yet happened. But it could. That often does.
you're not going to.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes.
How many teachers are on this plan?
There are 34,000 lives. I would say on the plan, it's in the neighborhood of 8,000 or 9,000.
So we have 8,300 teachers.
Yeah. But then there are administrators part of it. And there may be teachers who aren't in a bargaining unit for various reasons. So they're
Okay,
somewhere between there.
so if they opt to not take the insurance plan, they're gonna go with their husbands or their wives program, do they get any incentive to do that?
That was a big part of the bargaining. I forget sitting here now whether they do. I don't think they do, but soon they know otherwise. And I can get you the answer.
Cause I don't, what little bit I know about insurance, I do know that the more people you have participating in the program, the more leverage you have to bring the price down. And you can have, different plans for people to accept. Again, I think I'm hearing that we've got 10,000 state employees, teachers and out-of-state employees. But if we could get everybody, get one company to underwrite an insurance plan for the state of Vermont, and give us options that the teachers could accept and the other state employees. That's gotta be the way that we fix this, I think, and I don't know enough to say that, but I'd like to hear some testimony from somebody who does. Cause that's that's the long pole in the tent, it really is, and the most important part is just if we can do that. The other thing is competition. I mean, how many insurance companies have we actually got that, could we piggyback on another state's plan? The, New England region, to kind of get another company to underwrite a program for us that could save money or at least be stable.
Those are significant questions, and I think what Senator Hinsdale was maybe alluding to is maybe the parties can get together
Right.
and with state employees and Blue Cross.
Yeah.
Blue Cross is partnered with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Michigan right now to help them and maybe bring some economies of scale.
And I just think the Green Mountain Care Board is in its most functional place it's ever been. It sees the whole system and who tends to be responsible for the cost drivers. And it is unfair to just point out one large pool to say, we have to change collective bargaining and how we negotiate because property taxpayers are paying too much for healthcare. We're all paying too much for healthcare. And, if we're going to use VHI for what I think it was intended for, which was try and have a seat at the table to tell our healthcare providers that they can't keep increasing their costs this much, and our teachers can't afford to pay that, that's a conversation that I think Owen Foster could help us with, whether people just want to talk to them outside of committee or we have GMCB but I just don't know anybody else who gets the bottlenecks in the system as much as he does.
I will say this, prior to coming to Vermont VA many years ago, I was the general counsel of the Healthcare Administration, which is the precursor to GMCB. And I do think you are absolutely correct to say that they are more robust now than they've ever been. It's not on me as the Healthcare Administration, but they have tools and they need more tools to do this. And I think they're really digging into it in a way that's really creative and I think potentially very good for the state.
And according to the constituent mail that I'm getting, it's our fault that, because everybody knows that, healthcare costs are going up, potentially could go up again. And they're looking for us to set a policy that fixes it. I don't think that's in our wheelhouse.
Well, I guess I would just say from being part of too many healthcare conversations that went sideways in this building, the Green Mountain Care Board, I believe, is finally doing what we asked them to do, which is take politics out of it.
It's good to hear.
Do very good forensic analysis of where the costs are, and be the experts and hold people accountable to that. I agree with our constituents in the sense that the Green Mountain Care Board has had to tread really lightly or hasn't been given the tools or the political separation that they need to do their work. But now that they are very functional. And I think they've pinpointed exactly where we need to bring costs down.
Sure. So I think we're up at like 40,000 feet. I think this particular, the language which has been recommended to us does only two things. One, at the point of arbitration, it allows the arbitrator to pick between two different options, pieces from two different options. You coming from a negotiating background, I get that, okay? Because you don't go into settling a contract by only accepting one party's offer or the other party's offer. You talk and you try to find a compromise. So I don't have a problem with that language. And second, I don't have a problem with non-binding issues that are presented back to the arbitrators. In this case, as education spending versus essentially state GDP. It doesn't require anybody to do anything. It's just one is an option for an arbitrator and the other is just awareness for the arbitrator, right? So I think we're making more out of this. I completely agree. I agree completely that the state's healthcare system is completely, to use other people's terms, broken. This doesn't address any of that. This is about arbitration. This is about indicators to an arbitrating board. I don't have a problem with it, but I'm not going to die on the hill. So if others see this as an impediment to 480, I'm okay backing off of it, but I'll leave that to you guys.
As long as we don't use the word between.
No, again, not the molehill. I'm not going to die in that molehill.
Yes.
Just, I hear what you're saying, but I think that hearing more perhaps about the arbitration process is necessary because it's not, you know, it's not like this is legislative intent where it's just language that lives somewhere and we can go read it at some point if we want. But, you know, the arbitrator shall give weight to the evidence of these factors. And these two additional factors put an additional burden on both parties to get that research and get that evidence prepared for the arbitration process. So it's not, you know, just something that's kind of floating in the ether.
But they're not necessarily bad indicators. That's the point. I mean, there are indicators like the other list of indicators. And as a taxpayer, I'm okay with an arbitrator being aware of the balance or such that these indicators would provide.
Yes.
So the underlying problem, we're probably not gonna fix in the by April next year. So for the purposes of this bill or this issue, can we say we're gonna use language? Go up with agreement on that?
If we can agree to the language. Because, you know, this doesn't, we know how it's an issue, but that's not.
I've been trying to be really focused on the language.
Yeah.
I'll just say that.
That's
I
fine.
think the language above
That's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's focus on the language again, how we want to represent the bill.
I'm generally opposed to it. My point.
I'm just zooming out to labor law and healthcare law. And I don't think it's the like winning argument that some may think it is, that their position wasn't chosen, the VSB's position wasn't chosen. I mean, as we've heard, that's usually means that the arbitrator thought the other proposal was a fairer one, all things considered. With everything that is already in existing law, those are some pretty thoughtful but general conditions for the arbitrator. If we wanted to get more specific in the future, I'd be open to that conversation, but I can't agree with how these are worded. I don't think they're worded particularly well. I don't think Vermont Health Connect plans, especially with what might happen from the federal government any day, is a good metric. And I don't think overall economic growth for this, I truly don't know exactly what they mean by that, because that could be GDP, but overall is like a interesting word there. And then, you know, from a healthcare policy perspective, the Health and Welfare Committee would have to look at this about one of our biggest populations having an issue by issue healthcare plan. That usually isn't a coherent way to create a healthcare plan, is that we can choose a little bit of the, you know, the out-of-pocket costs over here and a little bit of the deductible over here. I'd be happy to set in motion a thoughtful proposal to come back next year, but none of this language strikes me as the right thing to do from a labor or healthcare policy perspective.
Where does change language come from originally?
The Superintendent's Association.
Okay.
So, okay, well, why don't we talk for today, why don't we give ourselves the evening, come back tomorrow, make a decision whether we check this one or not. And that will leave us with, tomorrow we have testimony coming from mostly the rest. We have from AOE and there are reasons why they think we shouldn't do it, and
You get a bit more on this tomorrow.
a bit more on this tomorrow as well. Okay, good. And we will, I'll get the call for, that for you in a couple minutes. And,
Is it
will, you're done.
Thank you very much. And secondly, if you're going to continue on the conversation, I would like to get our chief bargainer, lead bargainer, Mike Campbell, who's a teacher of faith-based elements, and see when he is.
Let's, well, what do we have, what do we have on this tomorrow?
It's at 1:30.
No, what do we have? What?
Oh, who do we have? Oh. Tomorrow we have Principal Association, Superintendent Association, and Joseph McNeil, attorney and chief negotiator from the school board association.
Okay, so you are, yeah.
I will get Will
Okay,
to the necessary contact.
Okay.
And see what we can do.
okay, and do that, and then we'll then tomorrow, then we also have the cardiac. Okay,
Can I just ask the committee if anyone has a problem with the language around the moratorium and nonprofits, that they would need to hear testimony tomorrow, because it is my Chittenden County constituents, so I'd like to keep it moving unless they're with the
I just
problem.
wanted to do a little exploration to find out if there's more to it than meets the eye.
Sure, yeah.
Not for negative reasons, just to make sure that we,
Beth gonna speak on that tomorrow or?
well, I'm gonna have to chat with her. Actually, yeah, depending on what she tells me. Maybe on tomorrow. And then I have to call into AOE, just to see if there's any, but, on its face as it relates to me, the notion of converting is fine. I just want to make sure that we are fully aware of what we're doing.
Right.
Yeah. So. Okay, so I
Thank
think
you.
with that, who do we have first for? Which is first for this?
The marketing.
First, and that's from one to one.
I have it at 1:30 to 2:30, but I may have switched around.
Wondering whether, we might want to do, if we get AOE in here from the cardiac bill first, let's reverse tomorrow and do that first. Is that possible?
I can reach out and see.
I've got one more question
Flip it. Yeah.
for Mr. Pan. So the arbitration process, is that televised? Do they record that?
No, they don't.
And say, it'd
It's
be
a,
nice for me to understand it if I could actually see it.
the background report eventually gets public, the arbitrator's decision gets public. So it does get public, but the process is designed to give parties room to negotiate. It's not a public meeting.
Right.
It's designed to, have some give and take. We'll do this if you do that, and it's designed to foster a give and take to reach a deal. That's the design of the process.
Thank you.